on ensuring that this is not two different countries for people based on their race. And just like we're going to have a Secretary of Education who believes in public education, you're going to get a head of environmental protection who actually believes in climate change and protecting the environment. We have to take on climate change as a national project, something that summons the energies of every American. And we're not going to get there clubbing some people over the head telling them they're the problem. We have to invite rural America to be part of the solution. We have to ask the military to be part of the solution. Everybody has to be part of the solution if we're going to tackle climate change before it tackles us. Yeah. And even though we know that we've got to act in order to prevent it from getting worse, we're going to have to prepare no matter what. Because we've got more and more extreme weather coming our way. And we call it natural disasters, but it doesn't seem to me particularly natural when there's no longer a fire season in California because it's just one long year of wildfires. And it certainly doesn't seem natural that Florence brought flooding more than 20 feet above the river's normal level. Barn right here was nearly submerged. The bridge behind us was the only road open to the rest of the state in this area. And what really doesn't seem natural is that it was the second 1,000-year flood to happen in a 3-year amount of time. That's not natural. We had a similar situation in our city, our river city of South Bend, Indiana. We had a 1,000-year flood. Then we had our 500-year flood, and they happened 18 months apart. So I'm thinking either I've got ridiculous statistical luck and I ought to get down to the casino quick and see how long that luck will last, or we've got a real problem on our hands. And it's why I think that the image of climate change in this country should not be a hunk of ice breaking off a glacier in the Arctic somewhere. It should be things like what I saw standing on the porch of a house on Frederickson Street in South Bend the night before the first day of school, with a mom asking me what she's supposed to do with her 4 kids as their toys go floating by on the first level of their house. I know scenes like that played out all around Conway and this whole region. So we got to face the fact that even as we confront the climate issue head on, we are going to be seeing more frequent and more devastating disasters. That's more floods, more storms, and more heat waves. And as one local expert shared with our campaign, I think she's right here. April O'Leary's here somewhere. And thank you for your help in putting this together. She talked about how we can't allow the culture to be business as usual. And unfortunately, business as usual is still the attitude in Washington too. We are a decade away from what the scientists tell us is the horizon of catastrophe. So we can't go back to business as usual. We cannot keep meeting more intense weather with underfunding relief and overextending personnel at FEMA. We can't wish away the challenge. We can't rearrange it with a Sharpie on a map. This is the real world. So we need a new approach to disaster preparedness. And as a mayor, I have seen the frustration that sets in for a local community when the federal disaster response just can't keep up, or when it takes too long, or when it's so confusing that local authorities and nonprofits and state officials are scrambling in order to cover for the gaps. But I've also seen the federal government at its best. We in South Bend worked with the Army Corps of Engineers after our flood to upgrade the technology for flood detection so that you could anticipate the problems. We could redo the floodway mapping so we could see it in real time. The potential is enormous. And when you put a mayor in the White House, what you're going to get is somebody who knows about the need to take the resources of the federal government and combine them with the appreciation for what works on the ground. Because what I've been so inspired by in my short time here in Conway and the area around here is the way the community pulled together and rose up to help each other. You should have a federal government at your back if you do that. We trusted each other with our lives. I want other Americans to have that same experience without having to go to war to get there. And I think being part of FEMA Corps is a great way to do that. Yeah. This is part of a bigger vision to make sure that the future doesn't have to be a dark place. Because as bleak as it is right now, as divided as we are right now, as stressful as it is to watch television news right now, we could be proud of the time we live in a few short years as we look back to these times. And I can't wait to tell my future children what we did now to give him a better world to grow up in. I'll tell him about how we let things get so out of whack that you could have the stock market going up and life expectancy going down. But then we took the steps to make sure this is an economy where a rising tide actually lifts all boats. And we'll stand taller knowing that we did that now. I'm going to tell them that 50 years after the Voting Rights Act, we still experience horrific racial inequality in this country. But then we took the steps in 2020 to bring about a day when your race had no bearing on your health or your wealth, your life expectancy, or your relationship with law enforcement. I'm going to tell them how at one point things got so bad we had kids learning active shooter drills before they learned to read, but then we summoned the courage to make sure the weapons of war were not on our streets in American neighborhoods. I'm going to take a lot of pride telling them how just before it was too late, we gathered our energies and decided to tackle climate change before it limited their opportunities in life. We would be proud. Everything associated with running for office is still an act of hope. When you put your name on the ballot, that's an act of hope. When you volunteer for somebody running for office, that is an act of hope. When you take time out of your morning as the moisture gathers in the air and you squint directly into the sunlight just to be part of the process of choosing our new president, you are part of an act of hope. So can I look to you to go into the community and spread that sense of hope? And are you ready to put away the reality show and change the channel to something better? Yeah! That's what this whole thing is about, and that's why I'm here with you. I'm so thankful that you've taken time to be together, and now that I've shared a little bit about what we hope to do about disaster preparedness and other issues affecting our country, I'm going to end the monologue and get into a dialogue. So looking forward to speaking about whatever's on your mind. I think we got some mic runners who can help make sure everybody's able to hear your question. I am much more concerned about the China challenge, and I've just viewed foreign policy differently going back to the Iraq War. I also do not believe that this president is a blip. I don't believe this presidency is an aberration. I believe it's a symptom of something much deeper going on in our society, and we got to pay attention to that. Because where I live, and I suspect where you all live, there's a lot of folks you know who maybe don't think that this president was a good guy, but they went off and voted that way because they were just ready to burn the house down. Because nothing works. And we got to find a way to respond to that without giving an inch to any of the immoral or corrupt or racist things going on in the White House right now. And I believe there's a way to do that. I also have a different view of political strategy, I guess. Look, I get that the biggest thing on the minds of most voters right now, even as they compare our policies and our plans, is just to make sure we win. One colorful way somebody put it to me in New Hampshire was, I gave my whole speech, he said, "You seem nice. I would vote for my neighbor's dog if I thought that was who had the best chance of beating this president." And so I think it's worth remembering that every time my party has won, I'm talking in the last 50, 60 years, every time we've won, it's been when we've put forward somebody with a new set of ideas who was not overly connected to Washington, and typically somebody who stood for a new generation. On the other hand, every time that we have tried so hard to play it safe, that we put forward the person with the maybe the most familiar face, but also the most time in Washington, the most kind of established figure, every single time we've done that, going back to Hubert Humphrey, we've come up short. And so I think I just have a different view about what wins elections. I think the biggest thing is to put forward a vision that can capture people's imagination, and that'll work across the attitude. Without putting too fine a point on it, I'll remind folks that while he was getting ready for season 7 of Celebrity Apprentice, I was down the road here in South Carolina getting ready for combat training to go over to Afghanistan. So I'm ready to deal with him. But let me say this, and this part's important. The most important thing we got to do dealing with him, especially for a broader audience that isn't following the blow by blow on MSNBC, is to deny him the ability to change the subject. Remember, we got news that that recession was maybe coming? And what did we spend that whole week arguing about? Greenland. He got us talking about whether to buy Greenland. He was a master at changing the subject.
Yes.
And so we got to do two things at once. When he does something wrong, when there's corruption, wrongdoing, racism, we got to call it out and put it in its place. But then, just as quickly, we got to return the subject to everyday life. Because it turns out, when it comes to how your life is going to be different under my presidency versus his, the American people are with us. The American people are with us on wages. They're with us on immigration, even issues where we've been on defense like guns. The American people are with us right now. The American people are with us on health care. They're with us on every major issue that affects their lives. And the beauty of it is, the less we're talking about him, the more we're talking about you. And so I'm going to make sure that this election is rooted in the everyday life of the voter, not the day-to-day life of the president. But when he does his little thing, I'll be ready. All right. I'm told we're about out of time, but I'm so thankful to spend time with you, and I just want to remind you of the power that is in your hands. As early state voters, you're going to be getting an awful lot of attention in the next few months. And it is so important. We are looking to you to be the kind of vetting committee that filters out all different people who want to be president. And now is a time for us to be bold and find a way to bring people together. And I know I can look to you to help make that happen and to talk to your neighbors and your friends, because you're motivated enough to follow the news every day or to come squint at me and be part of this conversation this morning. But a lot of folks are either so turned off that they don't think this affects them at all, or they're so polarized that they just get angry when they think about any of these issues. You have a chance to draw people into a bigger conversation. And so my only question is, can I look to you to spread that kind of spirit and bring people together around it? Are you ready to change that channel to something better? Well, I'm pretty sure you're going to help give me the nomination and send me to the White House, and I'm never going to forget this morning with you in Conway. Thanks for being here, and I will see you on the train out of the arms of their parents. Faith could also counsel us to seek leadership that walks in the way of humility and decency, and call for something a little bit different than what we got in Washington right now. We hear a lot about freedom, but I think freedom is a lot more than Amazon's freedom from paying corporate income taxes to the federal government. I think there's more to freedom than cutting a regulation somewhere. I think real freedom means making sure we have what we need in order to thrive. That means having health care. That means having access to education, which, by the way, is why we need a Secretary of Education who believes in public education. We're being divided around the very values that are supposed to hold us together. And we see a country that's gripped by a crisis of belonging. So profound that we see people self-medicated, and an increase in deaths from despair that could claim 2 million lives over the next decade if we don't do something about it. That wall on the border I don't think is ever going to get built, but some very real walls have been going up in our communities, in our churches, in our families. You see it when you go to Thanksgiving dinner. It feels like a minefield. And every time we turn on the television, our anxiety levels are going up, and our trust in one another is going down. Yeah. And I believe that's what we've got to fix. Yeah. Now, the good news is, in a few short months, people of South Carolina have an outsized role in beginning to fix it. Yeah. You get to not only work toward changing the president, but changing the conditions that got us here in the first place. And this isn't just for die-hard Democrats. We're building an American majority of people who know that we need a change. But in order to do that, we've got to make sure we're smart about this. It's not going to work to just promise back to normal, to treat this president like it's just a blip or an anomaly. Part of how we got here is that normal isn't working for too many people. So back to normal isn't going to work. Play it safe isn't going to work. Papering over our differences isn't going to work either. We gain nothing by setting it up to where people have to squint real hard to tell which party you're from. Nor do we have to further polarize and divide the American people or get trapped in a battle for purity for the benefit of people commenting on Twitter to where half the country is turned off before we even get to November. This is a time to unify the American people, and I believe that's what the presidency is for. So I'm asking you to picture a presidency that does that. Bold enough to actually get the job done and unifying the American people. And I'd like you to picture a president who, when you get up in the morning and turn on the TV, your blood pressure actually goes down instead of up.